ABQ, Grace Church ABQ. You can put that in and you can download. That's the easiest way, and you can just hit the connect button or you can text it in. We have a text number that you can text in prayer requests, or you can on the website. If you're joining us online, we're so glad that you're with us, and you can just go to your computer and do that as well. Well, welcome, and we are so glad that you are here. We want to connect with you. This is normally the part where I say, if you want to get involved with what we're doing, the easiest way is through giving and serving. And normally this slide comes up. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Mark is on it today. And so this is normally what I say. If you want to be involved in what we're doing, giving and serving is the easiest way to be involved. But today, I'm going to say that there's even an easier way. And a different way. And today, if you're new around here, if you're a guest, one of our guests, you have walked in on a little bit of a family meeting. A little bit of a family meeting. Now, if you want to join the family, if you say, hey, after today, you really want to know what we're doing, you say, I'm in. In about, 3 weeks or something, 3 weeks exactly, or 2 weeks exactly. So on July 25th, we'll have a first steps class. It's next steps, first steps. You'll be able to take some kind of steps. So you'll be able to just show up noon to 1:30, and there's free pizza. So it's a win-win-win, really. It's the third win is because I also get to eat a piece of pizza. That's good. And so you'll be able to do that. But today is a family meeting of sorts because I'm going to share with you what God has called us to do. And it was about 3 years ago, that I first shared this with the congregation of Grace Church. And it's a little weird, right? And so if you're a guest today, I want you to stay because we're still going to talk about what God has called us to do. We're still going to talk about the Bible. But this is pretty different. And then you're going to get to hear from three people who really are on mission for God and are already called to be a part of this. And then Amanda's going to come up and she's going to give you all the technical details that I can never remember. But 3 years ago, I said, hey, here is this plan that God has laid on my heart. And here's a couple of ways that I knew it was God's plan and not me, because it was something I've never done before. It was something that was way out of my wheelhouse. It was something that was so far removed from what I had ever thought about, from what I've ever experienced, from what I had ever done. See, it was either God or bad enchiladas, and I had had no bad enchiladas. There's not even really that much. You have to work hard to make enchiladas bad. But I knew this was God. And not just me, but then I shared it with the board, and the board confirmed it. We prayed over it, and then I shared it with groups of folks. And let me tell you, when I first started talking about this plan, I had people come up to me and go, Aaron, that's ridiculous. A church doesn't need a plan. A church doesn't need to do that stuff. We just need to, teach the Word of God, and we need to take care of people. It's like, yes, we do. We need to do those things. But to have no plan, right? To fail to, I had a coach, failure to plan, failing to plan is like planning to fail. They're like, well, but you're not really trusting God. If you have this plan, you're not trusting God. But I read Proverbs 21 where it says the plans of the diligent lead to abundance. They lead to abundance. But everyone who is hasty, comes only to poverty. Now, that's not always true, right? It's a proverb. It's not a promise. It's not a guarantee. There are some people that have hastily put a plan together and it works. And there are some people that have planned a long time and the plan has still not worked. But I'm going to go with the odds on that. And towards the end of Proverbs 21, it says that they put on a bold face. They are very sure of themselves. It says, but the upright give thought to their ways. They give thought to it. That sounds like a plan. And at the very end, Proverbs 21 starts with that the Lord has the heart of kings in his hand, and he guides them like streams of water. And then at the very end, it kind of ends this with this same kind of, militaristic thing. And it says that the horse is made ready for battle, but God gives the victory. But the horse has to be ready. You got to get that horse ready for battle. And to me, that is a plan, and that is a plan, and that is a plan. And let me tell you, there's a lot of things. So we move forward with a plan. So I think God gave us this plan. I am utterly convinced. In fact, that's what I've staked my life on. It's what I've staked my whole career. And let me tell you, if it doesn't work, sometimes that's what God does. But I'm moving forward, and we're already seeing it work. That's part of the other issue, is we're already seeing God confirm and confirm and confirm and confirm in so many ways. And so the plan hasn't changed. And so I talked about this as kind of a window, right? As if you're looking out the window and you look up, you see the furthest point of, if I look out my window, I see the mountains. And that's kind of the furthest thing off. I could get there. I could walk from here to there. It'd take a long time, and it's going to take a lot of resources. I got to plan. I got to prepare. I've got to really do some stuff to get ready for that. And so in that, our big goal is to develop and launch teams that plant and revitalize churches around Albuquerque and around New Mexico and United States and around the world. And so that's what you have if you look out this window. That was our goal 3 years ago, and I said, man, this is going to be like really I thought it was like a 25-year goal. Because I never, ever, ever had done anything like this. You know how many church plants I've been a part of? 0. You know how many times I've ever planted a church? 0. How many churches I've ever been around that have planted a church? 0. But I know this, right? I know that God is calling us to do this. One is because all the research that have been done on these churches, it says it takes a church an average of 7 years. 7 years to where it reaches its evangelism capacity. The first 7 years a church exists, it's almost exponential. How well they share the gospel, how well they welcome in new believers, how well they proselytize and share their faith, right? 7 years. And then after 7 years, it hits a plateau. And really the only thing it does, there are some exceptions. There's always exceptions to the rules. But typically a church just trends at either flat or down. Now, I don't know Grace Church hit its 7-year mark in 1946. I was just a young man back then. 46, that's when we hit 7 years. There's been a lot going on since 46. And so they say the best way, if you want to increase evangelism, if you want to increase the kingdom in the most effective ways, you plant and you replant churches, revitalize them. You take churches you take buildings and a core group of people, and it's just like a church plant with already a building, right? Or already a presence in the neighborhood of some kind. And so to do that, we've got to develop these teams and launch these teams and develop these teams and launch these teams. And I thought, man, that's going to be like a 25-year thing because I've never done it. I've never been a part of a church that does. And in fact, Grace Church, up until 3 years ago, had no plans to do that. Maybe a lot, but had no big push to do that. I've been here 14 years, and we had never had that, in my 14 years, had that big push to do that. And I thought it was never, I thought, man, okay, God, you got to do this because it may never happen if you don't. that God provided us. We've already have one. In the South Valley, we sent a pastor and his wife and a family. We sent a pastor down there. We sent a few couples. We are helping fund it. We serve. There are folks in Grace Church that serve on the board there. They have an external board because they don't have leadership there. They don't have qualified people to be board members or elders, and so we serve as their board, and so we are providing them leadership and mentorship and financial funding, and we sent them people. We had our maintenance staff go down there and say, hey, these are all the things we have to do. I mean, so I think it's a day a month we send folks down there. I've been down there rewiring a sound system. This is the kind of thing I thought, man, this will never happen, and here we are 2 years into this. I mean, last June is when we made John the lead pastor down there, John Gwynn and his family. And so develop and launch teams that will plant and revitalize churches. That's the goal, and it's still the goal. We can celebrate, hey, we've done it one time, it's great. We're not finished. And so next, if we look at this the next frame down, in 2 years, we have a goal. We already have people in the pipeline that care about these areas, Northwest Rio Rancho and Jemez and Southeast Albuquerque. Because the goal is a lot of places. It's Albuquerque, it's New Mexico, it's the United States, it's around the world, and that's ambitious, and that's a God-sized goal that Grace Church can't do unless God empowers us. But we've got to make the horse ready for battle. And God's either going to give us the victory or he's going to say, hey, not this time, because we already know who wins the war. We already know who wins the war, right? Like that's the great thing about fighting these battles. We know who wins the war. We're on the winning side. But we get the horse ready for battle. And the battles matter. And so right now, we have folks that are preparing to go to these places, Northwest Rio Rancho, Jemez, and Southeast Albuquerque, right now. In fact, you heard from one last week in Micah. He's looking at Southeast Albuquerque. We've been down there. We've prayed. We did a prayer walk with, 10 or 12 folks that prayed for that area. There's like one church for this whole huge neighborhood that needs more than one church. If one church was enough, we pack up and go home. If one huge church was enough, we pack, right? I mean, they're big. If Calvary or Legacy or Sagebrush or whoever, if that was enough, we pack up and go home. But you take, almost all of the churches, like all the churches in Albuquerque, I bet you there's not 100,000 people that go to church in every church in Albuquerque. What is that? Is that a tenth? Is that a tenth of this city? This city needs places like this. This city needs people. It needs people to prepare those horses for battle in those areas. And so we already have folks looking at Northwest Rio Rancho and Jemez and Southeast Albuquerque. And so the next down is we have planters and revitalizers developing their teams. You've already heard from one last weekend. You're going to hear from another one next weekend, and then at the first weekend of August, you'll hear from our third guy that's going to be a leader of that. He says God is calling him to be a leader of one of these areas. And then today, after I get done, and they're hoping I get done quick. So after I get done, you're going to hear from three folks who say, you know what, I'm not going to lead this thing, but I'm going to be a leader in it, and I'm going to help because God has put a passion into my heart for these places and people in these areas. And they're going to say, I don't want to head up the whole thing, but I want to be part of it. And I'm going to be on a team. I'm going to sit in the second chair or the third chair. I'm going to sit in a chair in one of these areas, and I'm going to get the horses ready for battle in this area. Because God will give us the victory, but we got to do our part. And so we have planters and revitalizers. They're currently developing their team. They are currently developing their team. And so what does that look like? What does that look like in our plan, right? In this plan that God has given us? Well, it looks like this. It looks like location groups, right? What are location groups? Those are small groups, small group Bible studies, prayer groups that meet in these areas, right? That are meeting in Northwest Rio Rancho and Jemez and Southeast Albuquerque that say, we're gonna go to a place and we're gonna have a study. We're gonna meet somebody's home that lives down there. And we are going to start meeting down there, start gathering folks, start praying for this part of our city or in Jemez, this part of our state. And we're going to be a presence down there even before we launch a church, a campus, a replant, whatever it is. Before we do that, we are going to saturate this place as much as we can, even before our presence is made known. We also need prayer groups. We need folks that will pray with and for these efforts. Because the horses are made ready for battle, but only the Lord gives victory. And so we need God. We need to petition God and ask God. And you see it throughout Scripture. So some people say, what's prayer for? Does prayer change you or does prayer change God? Well, I don't think it changes. I don't change God. But can you ever change God's mind? And I look at like when Abraham prays to save Sodom and God hears his prayer. I see prayer changing us a lot too. That's what the majority of prayer is for, right? Is that maybe you don't know these folks in these parts of the city. Maybe you have disdain for these parts of the city. You think of crossing the river much like going out of state, right? Like if you're an East Sider, that's a foreign country over there. Got to cross the river. I got to pack a lunch. I don't even know if there's do they have restaurants over there? I don't know, right? Southeast Albuquerque, maybe you have just said, and I say this literally, to hell with them. To hell. I don't care about that place. That place is already bad. And if you pray for those areas, you might have that same thought about Jemez. You know them up there in Jemez. You know what will change your mind about people is praying for them day in and day out and day in and day out. And God will turn your heart towards the same people that he loves. And so we need prayer groups. And the third thing we need is another set of residents coming through. So you're going to hear over these 5 weekends, you're going to hear from our residents, and I think we have 9 of them right now. We need another set, right? Because they're entering into year 2. They're halfway through year 1, and by January we need another set of residents because this is an ongoing thing, and there's attrition, right? Life changes happen, people move, people have to drop out, stuff happens. And so we need to keep reloading this because Grace Church is going to be a place that sends people to these areas that God has called them to. I am very, very content with having a church that is this size. because I know that God has called us to launch churches. My goal, right, the thing that God has laid on my heart, and if you hear me talk about those, sometimes I like those two things God has so infused me with this that if I say this is what God has laid on my heart, okay? That I don't ever want to go through another, in 2009, I helped, we added like 20,000 square feet or 24,000 square feet to the facility. I don't ever care to do that again. I don't ever care to do that again. Because our 7 years is up. And God's going to keep bringing us folks, and I'm so excited for that. And God, God keep, if you're joining us online and you're just now hearing about that, this is great. Like this, what we have is we are going to be a base that sends out to forwarding operating bases on the front lines where they're starting their 7 years, where they have maximal evangelical kingdom increasing effectiveness. And so we need other folks to come in and say, you know what, I want to serve. I want to plan or revitalize a church. I don't even know where, but here I am, I'm willing. And so we need another set of residents. And finally, here's where you come in. If you want to get involved in what we're doing, giving and serving are great places. And we need we need people to give, and we need people to give, and we need people to serve, because we still, we're not closing up shop here and sending everybody out. We still have a local church here that we are ministering to folks. We are having hurt and broken, and God's bringing us those folks, and we are bringing to Albuquerque and this little part of Albuquerque reconciliation with families and with people and God, and we're helping them figure out that church doesn't have to be this terrible spot, and we're doing that. And so giving and serving is great, but we need 300 people praying. Because 300 people praying, we feel like is the minimum. That is how you make a horse ready for battle for this war. How do you get a horse ready for battle? Well, we don't buy guns. You can, but we're not, like as a church. Because our battle is not with flesh and blood. Our battle is not won with guns and tanks. Our battle is not done with militaristic might. It's not done with strength. It's not done with the best technology. It's not done with the smartest people, right? Our battle is a spiritual one. And so how do you prepare the horses for battle? As you pray. As you pray. And so here in a minute, I'm going to call up RJ and Sarah and Jordan. You guys come on up. How do you prepare horses for battle? You pray. And so we need you. Every single one of you. If you're joining us online, we need you to pray. Would you prepare the horses for battle in this area? In Matthew 9, it says Jesus went all throughout the towns and the villages and teaching the kingdom in the synagogues and healing diseases, and he was going around healing afflictions. And it says when he saw the crowd, he had compassion on them. He had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And he says this to his disciples, pray. Pray. Pray to the Lord of the harvest, right? The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. With all the churches and all the things, we got 10%, 15% of Albuquerque is actively engaged in their faith in the gospel. The harvest is plentiful. The workers are few. If you own a business, you understand that right now. If you've tried to hire people, you understand this right now. The opportunity is out there. It is hard to find folks. And it is no different. Pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest that he will send out laborers into the field. How do you prepare the horses for battle? As you pray. And at the end of the service today, because we want commitments, at the end of the service, we want you to commit to praying for the next 6 months for this. And there's all kinds of stuff. Amanda's going to give you details because I don't do so well with those. But I would like to introduce first my good friend Jordan. Whoa. All right. He's my good friend Jordan. And this is Jordan. And then he's going to introduce RJ. And then RJ is going to introduce Sarah. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Good morning, Grace Church. When we started talking about this residency program, it was something super exciting. There's a lot of passion behind it, and that's just it warms my heart. Something that I'd like to talk to all of you today, just kind of about where I fit into that picture of what church planting, church revitalization looks like. But first, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what I do. I've worked for the past 15 or so years in music and audio. A lot of that was done in ministry. I've been serving in ministry, really my entire family has, since we were 4 or 5 years old. So about 25 years for me. With that, you can experience burnout really, really quickly. When you're giving up 5 days a week, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, to serving the community, to serving a church. And something that you have to keep in mind is Romans 12 calls us to live our lives as a living sacrifice to the Lord, holy and acceptable. That can be tough. It's hard to keep that in mind. Burnout happens. You get told something from a church leader and that doesn't happen. And that can turn into bitterness and turn into heartache and heartbreak. And that could cause anger and for you to leave the church and be angry at God. For me, that happened. I was very hesitant to come back to church. I knew my Creator. I knew his son, Jesus. I didn't like church or church people. Ben and I have been working together for 10-ish years. And he called me and he said, "Hey, come to Grace." No. A week later, Ben calls me again. "Hey, come to Grace." No. He was persistent. "Hey, come to Grace. If nothing else, I know that you love music. I know that you are good at what you do. Come enjoy music with us." You know what, Ben? I'll meet with you and I'll meet with your pastor and your leadership, and we'll see what we can do. if you guys want me to be there and run audio, I charge this amount per hour. So I had lunch with Aaron, and I told him I will never work for a church again. I will never volunteer at a church again. Aaron said, okay. Fast forward 5 years. Giving up Mondays sometimes, giving up Tuesdays sometimes, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, and I love it. Part of that is because I keep in mind now what Colossians 3:17 says. Whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God our Father. Keeping that in mind, it's always important for me to remember also the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, right? So often we're told, oh, it's a parable of the talents. There are many interpretations of what that means, right? It could mean money, it could mean whatever. Gifts that the Lord gives you. Regardless, it's something of value that the Master has bestowed upon us, right? And we are to invest that back into his kingdom and take risk for the kingdom. That could mean for me going and revitalizing churches, leaving my comfort zone and the community that has been built around me here at Grace. It's happened before, in bitterness and in anger, but God uses it. So that is what I would encourage you to do. Take risk for the kingdom. If that's praying, great. If that's investing financially, great. If that is getting involved, great. But I encourage you because it is so fulfilling to take risk for the kingdom. This is RJ.
I think if we're being honest, we've all had times where we've been unsure of what it is that God's doing in our lives. Maybe you were convinced that he was calling you to go somewhere, to lead a ministry, or even just to talk to that person. And then it doesn't seem to pan out like you thought it would. That's where I found myself during COVID. I'd been serving in several different ministries, often in some form of leadership, and it all just seemed to grind to a halt. Our young adult Bible study was suddenly forced to meet online, breaking the feeling of community that we once had, and attendance started to decline. At the same time, I'd been serving in youth ministry and just kind of found myself going through the motions and struggling to find that same passion that I once had for the ministry. Finally, I'd been serving in the booth in the back during service, and well, that was obviously out of the question. I felt lost. And what's worse, I felt like I was failing at my ministry. Now, I'd like to say that I sought God's guidance and prayed earnestly during those first few months, but I didn't. Instead, I sort of half-heartedly served where I was able, all the while blaming our circumstances and trying to fix things through my own strength. I was trying to force things to work out, trying to feel the same passion I had once felt, and trying to stuff my new reality into this new mold. And I was taking matters into my own hand rather than allowing God to take control. And it wasn't until I volunteered to teach one week at a young adult group that God corrected me. I was teaching on two of the names of God, El Roi, the God who sees me, and Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. Both are seen during the story of Abraham in Genesis 16 and 22, respectively. El Roi is revealed in a time where Abraham and Sarah are trying to take matters into their own hands and just mess everything up. On the other hand, Jehovah Jireh is seen in a moment where Abraham is fully trusting God after being told that he must sacrifice Isaac. The best part is, God works through both situations, regardless of circumstance, and uses it to reveal his nature. And this is where God convicted me. I had seen him provide time and time again through work, housing, and so many other aspects of my life, yet I wasn't trusting him to provide in ministry. I kept trying to do it on my own, confident that we were going to come up with some new solution to all our problems. Instead, I was just burning myself out, and things remained the same. Now, changing this mindset isn't easy. After all, it's human nature to want to be in control. It takes work to humble oneself and to submit to God's will. It takes prayer, and more prayer. But slowly, God began to guide me and to bring forth new mission opportunities. First, Amanda approached me and asked me to consider being Grace Church's digital strategy director. See, I come from a background of video production, but that was still a completely new avenue for me. I had to trust, as Abraham did, that the Lord will provide. Additionally, I was also approached about joining the Sin Network. Through prayer and discussion with my wife, Bren, I became convinced that this is where God wanted me. And that brings me to today. Honestly, I'm still kind of wandering through ministry. I'm still trying to figure out everything that God has planned. And that's a hard place to find myself in. I like knowing what lies ahead. I like being able to have a plan and understanding how God is using me. But I'm choosing to trust that he's in charge. He will guide me. He will give me the wisdom I need to continue moving forward. And I know this because God promises through David in Psalm 32:8, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Likewise, Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. It's promises like these that keep me going when circumstances surrounding me aren't what I would have hoped for, or when I just kind of feel like I'm slogging through life. I have to remind myself that God will meet me in those circumstances and help me to continue moving forward. I'm simply called to be faithful, to be present in the lives of those around me, and to be willing to take those steps of faith as they're presented to me. It's God's job to sort out the how, the what, the when. I pray that we would all remember that God is El Roy, the God who sees me, and that he is Jehovah Jireh, the Lord who provides. Allow him to take care of the specifics while we focus on bringing him glory in whatever ministry, whatever place, and by whatever means he leads us. When we humbly approach God with a willing heart, he will put it to good use. And now to Sarah.
Good morning, Grace Church. My name is Sarah Marsh, and I've been here at Grace Church for about 4.5 years, maybe 5 years now. And while I've been here at Grace, I have been the children's ministry assistant. I have been a small group leader for the youth and the children's ministry. Sorry, I don't ever talk with the microphone, so. But for the youth group and the children's ministry, I've helped with our young adults ministry, Refresh. And now I'm on the residency to plant and revitalize a church. If you had known me 10 years ago when I first became a believer, or even 4 years ago when I should have had this whole Christian thing figured out, you would have definitely questioned my qualifications to be on a church planting team. On paper, this all sounds great, but I actually didn't grow up in the church like the rest of the team here. I didn't really grow up with the typical Sunday school, the VBS, the youth groups, none of that. I didn't have that background. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my background and my testimony, a very condensed version of my testimony, to just kind of let you guys know what led me to here and how I'm being called to be on this team. So, like I said, growing up, I didn't grow up in church, but I knew about God. I knew who God was. I believed in God, but didn't have that relationship or anything like that. So all I had was what my grandparents had told me about him. And I experienced a lot of hardship very early on in my life, stuff that a kid or a child shouldn't have to go through, unfortunately. And that kind of put me on a path for the rest of my life of, a void that I had that I wanted to fill. My parents ended up getting divorced at a very impressionable time in my life when I was 6th grade, middle school, just starting out. A few years had gone by, and it was my freshman year of high school, and my mom and I had to move here to New Mexico from Florida, and that was not my favorite thing to do. I did not like New Mexico at all when I first moved here. After that, a few years later, I started working at Chick-fil-A at 17 in my senior year. And I'm pretty sure at that time I was the only person that wasn't homeschooled or going to church at Chick-fil-A. It's definitely the odd one out. But, time had gone by. I started making friends. I entered into a relationship with a believer. I had friends who were believers. And, that got me to hear the gospel from this new community I was a part of. I started to go to church a little bit, and I started to feel that tug on my heart. And then in October 2011, at 19 years old, I accepted Christ. And one of the things I remember the most during that time was the very first Bible verse that I memorized. These 10-year-olds around here probably have several Bible verses memorized, but for me, I still remember this one, and it's still my favorite. Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. So this is a great verse, but it's oftentimes very misunderstood, especially when you're 19 years old and you don't have any guidance or discipleship in your life. And I started off thinking my good was God's good, and that God was going to give me what I wanted, and it was going to be great, and I wasn't going to have anything hard happen to me anymore, and it was going to be, good. So I was in this relationship for about 3 years, and I put all of my hope and, happiness into this relationship. I thought this was going to be the good that I wanted. It was going to turn out really well, and then ultimately, as you could guess, or as you saw coming, it didn't end up that way. I was let down, and we broke up, and at that point, I believed God had let me down too, and at that point, I was done. I was like, no more. I'm not going to do this Christian thing anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to do what I want when I want to do it. This looked like partying, pursuing non-committal relationships, doing whatever I wanted, regardless of how it made people feel or how it affected them. And so this went on for a year or two, and then finally, I hit rock bottom. I didn't recognize myself anymore, and I definitely had forgotten who God was. So that was kind of like a wake-up call, and I had friends who were close to me, and they invited me to go to a local church's young adult group. So I said, why not? I'll go ahead and go. And after going a few times, I started to be reminded of who God was, and that, life wasn't all bad. So that went on for a little while. And then my husband and I, after his persistent pursuit, we started dating. And I started to attend his church for a couple years, which was great. And I love all those people very, very much. And then we got invited to come to Grace by a coworker manager friend, Steve Walston, if some of you guys remember him from a few years ago. At first, I came and I wasn't a huge fan of Grace, to be honest. But for some reason, it was Aaron, really. Just kidding. Just kidding. But yeah, so we came the first time. I wasn't a huge fan, but for some reason, we decided to try it again. And that second time, I felt very clearly called to make Grace Church our home. And at that time, I had no idea why. But at this point in my story, it seems like things are going really well and that life is getting good. But it hasn't been perfect by any means. I still messed up. I still did things I shouldn't have. I didn't live the best life. But since joining this church and connecting to the community, I actually experienced one of the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life here at Grace Church. But it was so different than any of the other things I had experienced before because I had this awesome community here at Grace Church. So, I had my church family to come alongside me, and for the first time in my life, they showed me what discipleship looked like. They were coming over and checking on me. They were calling me. They were pointing me back to Scripture over and over again. They were just loving me. And it was people that I didn't really know all that well, like Amanda and Stephanie and Whitney and Jessica. People I had relationship with, but they were like really inserting themselves into my life, which looking back, I couldn't have done it without them. So here at Grace was the hardest part of my life, but it was just so different than any of the hardest parts of my life before. I was pointed back to Jesus, and I was cared for and loved. And it was during this time that I finally understood that God was in control and he was going to work out this hard situation for his good. Whether that looked like what I wanted it to or not, it was going to work out just fine and be fine. All I had to do was put my faith and trust in him. And so we went through this hard time. I put my trust in him. I was pursuing him with 100% for the first time in my life, hands down. But now I can use that hard situation to glorify him and to show other people that don't have the perfect background, who don't grow up in the church, that they can be a part of the church. I didn't want to move to New Mexico, which means I wouldn't have worked at Chick-fil-A. I wouldn't have met my husband. We wouldn't have come to Grace, especially when I didn't like it the first time. We came again, and I wouldn't be here today on this team. And so I believe God has really allowed me to go through all these hard times so that I can witness to other people, so I can show people how God has been glorified through that. And I know God's going to use my testimony while answering this call to plant a church, to show them how wide and vast God's love is for us. No matter how far we get from God, he's going to come after us, and he's going to work everything out for his good, whether that looks like what we want it to or not. It reaches. So God's good is simple. He wants us to experience his love and know that it is better than anything we could choose for ourselves. And I can't wait to see what good God uses for this church plant.
I'm so proud of these folks. They don't like being on stage, and they have done a great job. And what I'm encouraged about is that we can all participate alongside of them by praying for them and for the others. And so if you are here in the room, I would encourage you to look for a card like this that should be on a chair. Or you should look for a device like this that might be in your pocket. In any case, all of these are going to go straight to the same place. You can write down your willingness to pray for these folks for the next 6 months, or you can open your app. You can click the big number, the 300, and fill out the form online. Or you can use this giant QR code that Mark is going to put up for us. You can just scan this with your phone right here in the room. We all learned how to do this while we tried to learn how to scan our menu at every restaurant that wouldn't hand us some paper. So this is how you do it. If you know how to do this, you can use this to scan, and it will take you to the same website. Or you can go to this website. Okay, 4 ways. You can go to this website, go back to the scan. Mark, can you go back to the QR code? Just leave that right there for him. or you can write on the card with a good old-fashioned pencil. The way that this is going to work is you're going to choose if you would like to receive prayer requests by email, or if you would prefer to receive the prayer requests by text message. You can get them both ways. If you're not sure that you will remember that there is an email, you can get them both ways. And then you'll have a text that tells you to go check your email. That's how I get young people to check their email, is I text them to tell them that they have an email. They're laughing, but that's because it's real. I text them and I say, you have an email. So if you are willing to join with us in praying for the teams that will be developed now and in the future, please join us in praying. We're going to send out prayer requests every 2 weeks, and they will be for specific areas sometimes, they'll be for specific teams sometimes, but always they will be pointing us towards this mission that we're all on together. And your part in it can be in being one of the 300 that is praying for church planting and revitalization through Grace Church. Let me pray as we close. Father, I thank you for these folks that you are working in their lives. I thank you that you are calling them specifically. Father, I pray for the folks that might be hearing this that are like, maybe that's me. I pray that you would continue to develop that passion, that direction, that clarity for them. I pray for Grace Church that you would help us to be a place where teams can be sent from. And Father, I pray for the places that you will send these teams, that even today, that you will be preparing the hearts of people there to receive your word, to receive your Son, and to become part of the church.